Alina Marlowe slouched in seat 14A, her hood drawn low over her hair, earbuds humming faintly with a playlist she didn't even want to listen to. She stared out the tiny oval window at the sprawling city below, lights glimmering like fireflies. The cabin smelled of reheated coffee and disinfectant. Flight 227 to Denver felt ordinary in every sense. A Monday evening, weary passengers, the low hum of engines vibrating through the floor. To anyone scanning the plane, she was invisible, quiet, unremarkable, a shadow in a sea of travelers. The businessman beside her, briefcase perched on his lap, flipped through financial reports, barely glancing at her as she nudged past him to settle in. A mother in the row ahead tugged at her toddler, who kicked the seat in front of him. A flight attendant rattled down the aisle, smiling politely, exchanging a nod with another attendant when she passed Alina. Even the seatbelt sign blinked with indifferent monotony. No one would have noticed the subtle tension beneath Alina's calm. Her fingers traced the edge of her backpack strap, worn leather rubbing calluses into her skin. She took a deep breath, trying to absorb the ordinary air, to convince herself the outside world could not see her. She had flown countless times before, but this trip felt different. Something in the pit of her stomach tightened, a low hum of warning she could not explain. Seat 14A. The voice was neutral, polite. She looked up and the flight attendant nodded, confirming her place. Alina smiled faintly. "Yes," she said, voice low, almost swallowed by the hum of the cabin. The attendant moved on, unaware of the weight of her identity. For months she had perfected this quiet persona. The hoodie, the muted gaze, the nonchalant posture. Everyone who ever knew the real Alina had either vanished or pretended she did. Her past, filled with codes, operations, and clandestine missions, belonged to another life, a life she had left behind in secret. She had hoped anonymity would last forever, that no one would ever know where seat 14A had taken her. Plane rattled slightly as it taxied, a low thrum echoing in her chest. She pressed a finger against the window, eyes narrowing at the clouds rolling over the city lights. Something felt off, an instinct buried deep beneath years of training told her to look. She scanned the cabin slowly, pretending to study the other passengers. A man fiddling with his laptop, a teenager snapping selfies, a woman asleep with her scarf covering her face. Nothing unusual, nothing threatening. And yet the feeling persisted. 20 minutes into the flight, the captain's voice crackled over the intercom, breaking the soft monotony. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've been asked to maintain a heightened security alert. We request all passengers remain seated and calm. Thank you." The cabin stirred. Passengers exchanged nervous glances, whispering among themselves. The businessman beside her adjusted his tie, suddenly very interested in the safety card in the seat pocket. A mother clutched her child closer. Alina's stomach twisted. The announcement had not been directed at her, and yet somehow she felt it. Then through the tinted windows, shadows appeared, sharp silhouettes cutting through the fading sunlight. The faint hum of engines outside changed tone, a higher pitch layering over the plane's own vibrations. Alina's pulse quickened. Two shapes maneuvered with precision, their sleek forms unmistakable. F-22 Raptors glided alongside the aircraft, cutting across the horizon in perfect synchrony. Passengers gasped, craning their necks. Phones were raised, capturing footage of the jets as they banked in formation. One of the pilots leaned, adjusting his helmet, and the morning light glinted off the visor. The movement froze Alina in place. His gaze wasn't on the cockpit, wasn't tracking flight patterns or altitude. It was fixed on her. Her fingers clenched the armrests. The flight attendant froze mid-step, her eyes widening. A whispered word passed between two of them. 14A. Alina's ears, plugged with earbuds, still caught it. The moment was electric, charged with danger she couldn't yet define. The captain's voice returned, tense and clipped. "Ms. Marlowe, cockpit requests your presence immediately." The words sliced through the cabin, reaching only her and leaving every other passenger bewildered. The mother across the aisle blinked, her child's hand clutching hers. The businessman stammered, They're looking at you." Alina's mind raced, every instinct she had cultivated over years of classified operations flaring to life. She wasn't the quiet girl in seat 14A, not really. She was someone they had hunted, someone whose existence had been erased from records. And now, for reasons she did not yet understand, she had been found. She rose slowly, keeping her hoodie low and her gaze steady, moving down the aisle past wide-eyed passengers whispering in confusion. Each step felt surreal, as though the cabin had become a stage for something larger than life. She approached the cockpit door, hand hovering over the latch, heart hammering like a war drum. Outside, the Raptors maintained their deadly ballet, dipping and climbing with calculated precision. One of the pilots leaned close to the canopy, sending a signal she recognized, though it was one she had hoped no one else would remember. Her throat tightened. The code, the sequence, the pattern, it had been classified beyond top secret, and yet here it was acknowledging her. Alina inhaled, steadying herself. "They weren't supposed to find me," she whispered. Her fingers brushed the latch, cold steel against her palm. The cockpit door slid open and the captain looked up, eyes wide with a mixture of disbelief and caution. "Ms. Marlowe," he said, voice low, "we've got a situation." Outside, the F-22s held their formation, engines screaming like predators circling a wounded prey. Inside, the cabin sat in stunned silence, passengers frozen mid-breath, unaware of the history swirling around them. Alina stepped inside the cockpit, every nerve alert, every sense heightened. She was no longer just the quiet girl in seat 14A. She was a name, a signal, a call sign long thought buried. And someone somewhere knew it. Her lips barely moved as she whispered to herself, "Spectre." The captain froze, a sharp intake of breath. "How?" Before she could answer, one of the F-22s dipped sharply, almost grazing the plane's wing, a silent demand in its movement. The air thrummed with tension and Alina's chest tightened. This wasn't a routine escort. It was a warning, a test, a summons she could not ignore. She pressed her forehead against the cockpit window for a moment, staring at the pilot in the lead F-22. Recognition flashed in his visor. Shock, relief, something dangerous and raw. Alina's stomach dropped. "This is bigger than I thought." The hum of the engines blended with her rapid heartbeat, and for the first time in 18 months, Alina Marlowe felt the past crash into the present with unstoppable force. Seat 14A no longer belonged to a girl hiding from the world. It belonged to someone who had made enemies, saved lives in secret, and now, unknowingly, had just been found. The captain's voice cut through the thick tension again. "We need to make a decision, now." Alina's eyes flicked to the F-22s outside, shadows against the darkening clouds. They weren't going to leave. They were waiting, watching, judging. She swallowed hard, every muscle taut. Whatever came next, there was no turning back. And then she whispered almost inaudibly, "Let's see who remembers Spectre." Stepped back from the cockpit window, her gaze locked on the F-22s slicing through the sky. The airliner trembled beneath her feet as if sensing the power hovering outside. The pilot in the lead jet tilted his wings sharply, a maneuver she recognized instantly. It wasn't a casual display of air superiority. It was a signal, coded and precise, meant only for someone who knew. The passengers behind her were unaware of the significance, their phones raised, snapping pictures and recording shaky videos. A mother clutched her child, whispering reassurances she didn't feel, while a businessman muttered curses under his breath. The low hum of the plane's engines was drowned out by the roar of the Raptors as they maintained deadly formation. Alina's hand hovered over the comms panel in the cockpit, fighting the urge to respond. She hadn't expected to be recognized, and certainly not this publicly. Yet the F-22 pilot, Spectre's old teammate, the only other person who could read the signal, knew her. Recognition in his movements was unmistakable. He had been trained to conceal emotion, to operate with precision under pressure. But the slight hesitation, the wing adjustment, the microsecond tilt, it screamed familiarity. "Captain," Alina said, her voice steady despite the adrenaline roaring through her veins. They know me. It's not just an escort. They're not following protocol. They're trying to communicate. The captain's face paled. Communicate who is they? Alina ignored him, scanning the surrounding sky. The second F-22 fell into a position slightly above and behind, maintaining an angled vantage that allowed for both visibility and attack. It was a classic maneuver from her former operations, a double cover designed to control the situation without immediate confrontation. She clenched her jaw. They're waiting for me to make the first move. A voice crackled in the cockpit speaker. The flight attendants had no idea what was unfolding. Folks, remain seated. We're experiencing some unusual air traffic. The announcement barely penetrated the rising tension. Alina pressed her palms to her eyes for a brief moment, counting heartbeats. She hadn't felt this kind of adrenaline in months. The F-22 pilot in the lead jet, call sign Hawk, adjusted his altitude slightly, dipping in a subtle wave that only she would notice. The wing tip glinted in the fading sun, and she realized with a shiver that Hawk wasn't alone. His movements were mirrored with microscopic differences by another pilot, a second, unidentified Raptor. Not a team I know, she thought, narrowing her eyes. Someone else is here. Captain, Alina whispered, pointing to the trailing jet. That second Raptor, it's not NORAD. It's not an American protocol pilot. Someone else is shadowing them. The captain's hands tightened around the controls. Are you saying we're being followed by hostile aircraft? Alina exhaled slowly, trying to steady herself. Not just hostile, trained. Someone who understands the protocols we designed. Someone who knows how to interpret Spectre's signals. Someone who knows me. The hum of the engines changed suddenly. The plane shuddered as turbulence hit, or maybe it wasn't turbulence at all. Outside, the unidentified F-22 shifted its formation aggressively, forcing Hawk's lead jet to respond instantly. Alina's stomach knotted. She recognized the pattern immediately. They're testing me, seeing if I'll panic. She sank into her seat for a moment, observing the cabin. Passengers were murmuring, some standing to get a better look outside. No one had any idea they were inside a live scenario involving America's most advanced fighter jets and an ex-operative whose call sign had been classified to oblivion. They're not supposed to be able to trace me here, she thought. And yet, here they were. Alina's mind raced through possibilities. Could it be a recall? Had her old mission team sent her a signal to return, expecting her to act? Or was this something darker, a rogue faction, someone who had stolen her designs, now using them against her? Her hand went to her jacket pocket, fingers brushing the small metal tag she kept hidden. The call sign etched there, Spectre, was no longer just a memory. It was alive, flashing a warning across the skis. Hawk had recognized it instantly, his maneuvers confirming he understood her identity. But the other jet, the one she hadn't anticipated, remained a question mark. Suddenly, turbulence jolted the plane violently. Oxygen masks dropped, startling passengers into shrieks and panic. Alina gripped the back of her seat. Outside, the second F-22 mirrored Hawk's every movement but with subtle aggression, testing, probing. She realized with a flash of dread. This was no routine escort. The second pilot was forcing the F-22s to act like guardians and predators at the same time. The captain's voice broke through the comms. We're experiencing flight anomalies. I need you to. Not here, Alina interrupted. Her mind clicked into tactical mode. She had flown with drones, with humans, and even with experimental stealth tech. She understood this pattern. They want me to make a choice, and every second counts. Outside, Hawk's jet dipped suddenly, drawing a line that screamed urgency. The other F-22 shifted to intercept, forcing Hawk into a defensive maneuver. Alina's pulse raced. He's sending a warning, not a command. Something is moving faster than them, something I don't know. She swallowed, remembering old mission drills. In training, situations like this were hypothetical. Now they were very real. Every eye on the plane, every finger pointing, was irrelevant. Only she could read the signals correctly. Her call sign, her identity, had never been meant for public recognition. And yet here, in the middle of civilian airspace, she had no choice. Alina took a deep breath and pressed her forehead to the cockpit window, eyes narrowing. Hawk mirrored the movement from above, tiny adjustments visible even through the reinforced glass. Recognition was mutual, but the second jet, unknown, aggressive, calculating, remained. It had no hesitation. It knows exactly who I am, and it's not here to protect me. The captain's voice trembled. "Ms. Marlowe, you have to tell me what's happening." She shook her head, heart pounding. "I don't have time, just watch the jets. We're not alone." Passengers shifted uncomfortably, sensing the tension but not comprehending it. Phones were forgotten. Conversation stopped. A young woman in the row ahead clutched her partner's arm, whispering questions that went unanswered. Alina's gaze stayed locked on the sky. Hawk dipped his wings slightly, signaling a familiar protocol, an old code meant to communicate urgency without words. She realized the truth. He didn't just recognize me. He was counting on me. And then just as suddenly the plane shuddered again. The second jet executed a sharp roll, almost brushing the wingtip of Flight 227, a silent threat. Alina's stomach dropped. This wasn't an escort. It was an interrogation in the skis, a test she had to pass or fail. She pressed her fingers to the metal tag in her pocket, whispering under her breath, "They weren't supposed to find me. Not here. Not now." Outside, Hawk maintained his position, a lifeline against the unknown threat. But Alina's heart sank as she realized something she hadn't wanted to admit. The second pilot knew exactly how to force her hand. Every maneuver, every subtle tilt, every mirrored response. It was a message only she could interpret. And it was one she feared might demand a choice she wasn't ready to make. The cabin remained oblivious, passengers murmuring nervously, clutching each other. But in seat 14A, Alina's mind was already running simulations, tracing possibilities, calculating probabilities. Somewhere above, in the clouded expanse, a silent battle of recognition had begun, a battle that only she could finish. And somewhere behind Hawk, the second jet lurked, patient, deliberate, waiting for her next move. Alina swallowed hard, her voice barely audible. "This isn't just about me anymore." The cockpit was a small, humming bubble of controlled chaos. Alina stepped in, closing the door behind her, the latch clicking with a finality that made her stomach tighten. Captain Rhodes, normally calm and methodical, turned in surprise, his eyes wide as they swept over her face. "Ms. Marlowe, Alina didn't answer. She pulled a small, battered metal tag from her hoodie pocket. The edges were worn, the engraving faded but unmistakable. The captain's breath hitched. His hands froze mid-motion over the controls. The tag was small, almost innocuous to anyone else, but to him it carried the weight of a name the military had erased from all official records. He swallowed hard. "Spectre," he whispered, disbelief heavy in his voice. Alina's eyes narrowed. "I told them not to ever use that name again." Her voice was calm, but every syllable carried tension, restraint, and danger. Outside, Hawk mirrored the wingtip signal from 20,000 feet above, subtle but precise. Recognition and urgency blended into a language only she could read. The captain ran a hand down his face, jaw tight. You were supposed to be gone. Records show you retired or disappeared. This call sign, how, why?" "Because someone wants me found," Alina said, cutting him off. Her eyes flicked to the radar panel, the blinking dots that tracked the Raptors and the mysterious second jet shadowing them. "And it is Hawk alone. There's another." Rhodes leaned forward, voice low. "Another pilot, you mean hostile?" Alina shook her head slowly. "Not just hostile, trained, inside knowledge. Someone who knows how to anticipate Hawk's every move. Someone who can predict me." Her pulse thrummed in her temples, every beat a warning. "We're not just being escorted, we're being tested." The captain's hands trembled slightly over the throttle. "Tested by who?" Alina didn't answer immediately. She traced the tag with her thumb. Memories crashed over her, night missions, encrypted signals, drone operations no one else could touch. Spectre wasn't a call sign. It was a warning, a lifeline, and a record of her existence that should never have been retrievable. Outside, the second jet dipped and rolled, almost brushing Hawk's F-22. The maneuver was aggressive but calculated, a demonstration of control. Elena's stomach dropped. The pilot wasn't reckless, he was deliberate. He knows exactly who I am. "Captain," she said finally, her voice firmer now. "Listen, I need full control over communications. Nobody, and I mean nobody, is to speak over the comms except me. This is classified, top level. If anyone intercepts this, there's no coming back." Rhodes hesitated. "I don't." "You don't have a choice," she interrupted. "If we don't handle this correctly, Flight 227 becomes collateral. You follow my instructions, or we all pay." Her words carried a finality that made the captain nod, his earlier hesitation replaced with a silent trust in her precision. She keyed into the cockpit's secure comm line, fingers moving over the panel like she was composing a battle plan rather than sending routine signals. A series of high-frequency pings pinged back, precise responses only she could interpret. Hawk responded immediately, rolling his jet slightly to match her coded signals. A surge of relief and dread collided in her chest. She hadn't seen him in 18 months. And now he was here, hovering in the sky, fully aware of her identity and every action she might take. The second jet shifted again, intercepting an angle that threatened to corner Hawk. Elena's mind raced. She recognized the flight pattern instantly. It wasn't just aggressive. It was methodical, testing her limits, forcing her to respond in real time. She had trained for scenarios like this in simulations, but simulations never included civilians in the airliner below. She pressed a hand to her temple. "Think, anticipate, outmaneuver." "Captain, brace yourself," she murmured. "We're about to be in the middle of a tactical engagement. Do not engage unless I tell you. Keep us steady." Rhodes nodded, sweat glistening on his forehead. His hands tightened on the controls, knuckles white. The hum of the engine seemed louder now, almost deafening in its intensity. Elena's thoughts shifted rapidly. Hawk had to know she would respond correctly. Every micro-movement outside, every tilt of the wings, every roll, they were instructions and warnings, but coded in a way only a former operative with her training could decode. One wrong response, one hesitation, and the plane could be lost. Her fingers hovered over the emergency comm panel. She keyed in a narrowband encrypted signal, the type designed to reach only specific military aircraft. The signal hummed with authority, a signature only Hawk could recognize. The lead F-22 dipped sharply, acknowledging her command. The second jet mirrored the movement, more aggressively this time, testing her resolve. Elena's stomach tightened. She realized something frightening. The second pilot was likely a former insider, someone who had access to classified information she thought was destroyed. "Captain," she said softly but with a sharp edge, "do you see the second jet?" He nodded, eyes wide. Yes, but what is it doing? Why?" "Observe," Elena said, pressing her forehead against the cockpit window. Her mind ran through every mission, every training exercise, every moment where life and death depended on reading subtle cues. The second jet's movements weren't random. They were designed to intimidate, to provoke, to manipulate the decisions of the pilot below. She turned back to Rhodes. "That pilot knows how I think, and now he's forcing me to act. Do not panic, do not respond to him, only do what I say." The captain exhaled slowly, understanding the stakes. The airliner trembled beneath them as the second jet circled in tight patterns, close enough to make the pressurized cabin hum with the resonance of its engines. Elena's thumb brushed the metal tag again. Spectre, a name she thought erased, a call sign she thought buried in secret files, was alive, recognized, and now drawing her back into a world she had fled. She felt the weight of every mission, every secret, every life she had saved, and every life lost, crashing into the present moment. Outside, Hawk adjusted his wingtip, a clear, deliberate acknowledgement, recognition, assurance, but also a warning. Time was short, choices had consequences, and one misstep could be fatal. Alina's lips barely moved as she whispered, almost to herself, "I didn't ask to be found. Not here, not now, and certainly not like this." The cockpit went quiet except for the low hum of the engines. Every system, every control, every panel seemed alive with tension. The second jet lurked outside, silent but threatening, a predator waiting to test her instincts. Alina exhaled slowly, eyes narrowing. "It's no longer just about getting to Denver," she murmured. "It's about survival, and someone out there wants to see if Spectre still has what it takes." Captain Rhodes swallowed hard, understanding for the first time the full scope of what he had stepped into. He glanced at her, seeking reassurance. Alina's expression was unreadable, controlled, but beneath it, a storm of memories and emotions surged: fear, determination, and the unshakable instinct of someone trained to survive against impossible odds. Outside, Hawk dipped his wing once more. Recognition, trust, warning. Alina pressed her hand against the tag one last time before tucking it safely back into her hoodie. Her voice was low, firm. "Let's see who remembers Spectre and who's trying to kill her." The hum of the engines blended with her pulse, and for the first time in nearly 2 years, Alina Marlowe felt the past collide violently with the present. The quiet girl in 14A was gone. In her place stood Spectre. And someone, somewhere in the sky above, had just remembered exactly who she was. Alina Marlowe leaned against the cockpit window, her fingers tracing the faint scratches along the metal panel, the hum of Flight 227 vibrating through her bones. She had been trained for high-stakes missions, covert operations, and moments where a single miscalculation meant death. But this was different. Civilians filled the cabin below, their lives unknowingly dangling from a web of aerial codes, threats, and secret pasts. "Spectre," Captain Rhodes said again, voice barely above a whisper. "That call sign, it's not just a name. I thought it was erased. Gone." Alina nodded slowly, staring out at Hawk's lead F-22, circling protectively but still watching her like a hawk. "It was supposed to be gone. I made sure it would disappear from every database, every classified file, every military record. Nobody was supposed to know it existed. Nobody except me and him." Rhodes exhaled, the gravity of her words sinking in. "Then why now?" Alina's jaw tightened. "Because someone wants me found, and it is Hawk alone." She gestured subtly toward the second jet, which danced in the sky with unnerving precision. "That pilot has full access to Spectre's protocols. Everything I've ever done, every code, every mission pattern, he can predict it." The captain swallowed, swallowing back panic. "Are you saying someone's using your own work against you?" Alina's eyes darkened. "Yes, and it's worse than you think. This isn't a foreign threat, it's internal. Someone from the same vanished program I was part of. They've been hiding, waiting, watching, and now they're making their move." Outside, Hawk's jet adjusted again, dipping slightly to maintain visual contact with Flight 227. The second jet mirrored every motion, a silent predator testing, prodding, and pushing the boundaries. Alina's pulse accelerated. This was no longer an escort. It was an interrogation, and she had been called back into the arena she thought she'd left behind. She pulled the comms panel closer, fingers flying over the encrypted controls. A series of narrowband signals blinked back, confirming that Hawk was reading every movement, every code, every subtle signal. The sense of urgency was palpable. The second jet, however, was silent, patient, almost mocking. "They want to see what I do next." Her mind raced back 18 months to the operation that had ended her career, or what the military called her disappearance. A drone mission gone wrong, lives lost, cover-ups initiated, records scrubbed. She had gone underground to escape the ghosts and the blame, disappearing completely. The call sign Spectre had been erased, sealed, and buried. And yet here it was, alive in the sky, recognized by Hawk and the unknown pilot alike. The captain's voice cut through her thoughts. "Elena, why would someone from your old program, why would they target a commercial airliner? Civilians." Elena's gaze hardened. "Because they know it's the easiest way to force me into the open. They can't come after me directly without exposure, but lure me here, manipulate the situation, put innocent lives at risk, and I have no choice but to act. That's the kind of person we're dealing with." The plane jolted slightly, a turbulence-like shake that set passengers murmuring. The second jet rolled aggressively, forcing Hawk to respond immediately. Elena's stomach dropped. The precise timing of the maneuver confirmed her fears. This wasn't an accident or intimidation. It was a test of skill, patience, and loyalty. "Captain," she said softly, leaning over the console, "I need you to follow my instructions exactly. No improvisation, no hesitation. The moment I say we act, we act. Until then, just keep the plane steady and don't panic the passengers." He nodded, swallowing, hands gripping the controls. "Understood." Elena pressed her forehead to the panel, exhaling slowly. She could feel the weight of the past pressing down on her, the missions, the mistakes, the lives lost, and the call sign she had hoped would never resurface. Spectre wasn't just a name. It was a history of covert operations, encoded messages, secret victories, and buried failures. It was a beacon and a warning, one that now painted a target on her back. Outside, Hawk's F-22 dipped in a calculated move, signaling that he understood the stakes. Elena responded, sending a subtle sequence through the secure comms that only he could decode. A micro moment of recognition passed between them, silent but deafening in its importance. She was alive. She was here. And the mission, or the trap, was just beginning. The second jet, however, remained an enigma. Aggressive, deliberate, patient. Every roll, every dip, every shift was designed to provoke a response she could not fully anticipate. Elena clenched her jaw. She knew from the operations she had led and survived that the pilot was an expert, someone who had been trained inside the same classified program, someone who understood her strategies as well as she did. Her mind flickered over the possibilities. Could it be an old colleague turned rogue, a programmer who had stolen the designs of her drones, someone seeking revenge or recognition? Every possibility ended with danger, and every answer would demand action. Her fingers brushed the metal tag again, a comforting weight against her palm. "Spectre." She whispered it under her breath, tasting the word, the identity, the inevitability of what she must do next. "It's no longer about staying hidden," she murmured. "It's about surviving and protecting these people." The captain looked at her, eyes wide. "Elena, I don't know if I can comprehend what you're telling me. Internal threat, rogue pilot, classified operations, and you're the target." She nodded, calm but resolute. "Exactly, and if I misstep, innocent lives die." Outside, the second jet made a sharp maneuver, forcing Hawk into defensive flight. Elena's stomach twisted. The choreography of the air battle was exacting, testing both her and Hawk in ways the passengers could never imagine. Each micro-movement, each angle, each roll, meant to provoke recognition, fear, and reaction, and only she could decode it in time. Her pulse thrummed with adrenaline. This is exactly why Spectre existed, she thought. To read, to anticipate, to survive when the impossible pressed in from every direction. She was alive, yes, but she was being drawn back into a world she thought she'd left behind. A world of shadows, coded signals, and threats that only the train could see. Elena exhaled, finally straightening, her gaze fixed on the jets outside. Hawk dipped once more, confirming he understood her silent instructions. The second jet mirrored the movement but with subtle aggression, testing her resolve. She turned to the captain, voice steady. "This isn't just about me. Whoever's controlling that second jet, they know the network, the codes, the hidden operations. They've infiltrated us. And right now, they want to see if Spectre still has what it takes." Rhodes' hands trembled slightly as he nodded. The plane held steady, passengers still unaware of the storm unfolding around them. Alina's jaw tightened. The quiet girl in seat 14A was gone. In her place stood a trained operative, a former ghost of military operations, the living embodiment of the call sign she carried and the dangers it now attracted. Her fingers brushed the tag one last time before tucking it safely into her hoodie. She whispered to herself, "Let's see who's brave enough to remember Spectre and who's foolish enough to challenge her." Outside, the clouds shimmered with the fading sunlight. Hawk adjusted his wingtip once again, acknowledgement and warning all in one. The second jet circled silently, patience masked with menace. And somewhere out there, the rogue pilot waited, ready to force Alina into action she wasn't sure she could take, and Flight 227 hung in the balance, unaware of the deadly game unfolding just above them. Alina Marlowe hunched over the cockpit console, her fingers flying across the controls as if guided by instinct alone. Every panel, every blinking light, every micro-frequency pulse carried meaning she was trained to read. Outside, the two F-22s danced through the sky in an intricate ballet of threat and recognition, Hawk protective and precise, the second jet aggressive and predatory. But it wasn't just the pilots she had to worry about. The unknown rogue operator had access to something far more dangerous, a signal no ordinary human or civilian could interpret. The encrypted transmission reached the plane through a secure channel only she could decode. Its patterns shifted constantly, microbursts of frequency, rotations, and subroutines embedded inside what appeared to be random atmospheric interference. She recognized the methodology immediately. "This is my work," she thought, jaw tight. Every pattern, every pulse, every algorithm bore the signature of her own designs, but it had been stolen, repurposed for something she could not yet see. "Captain," she said, voice low but urgent, "the rogue jet isn't acting alone. This signal, it's controlling the drone swarm we weren't expecting. They're using my old patterns against us." Rhodes' eyes widened as he glanced at the radar screen. Tiny, almost imperceptible blips darted in formation around the aircraft. "Drones?" he asked, disbelief and panic creeping in. "In the airspace with us?" Alina nodded grimly. "Not just drones. Unmanned craft built with designs I once created, fully autonomous. They can predict flight patterns, anticipate defensive maneuvers, and they've been programmed to execute lethal precision." The plane jolted, a sharp tremor rattling through the cabin. Passengers cried out, hands gripping the seats in front of them. The oxygen masks dropped automatically, adding chaos to the growing tension. Alina's stomach sank. She had known the risk, had expected danger, but never inside a plane carrying innocence, with every wrong move potentially catastrophic. Outside, Hawk rolled his jet in a calculated maneuver, intercepting one of the tiny drones before it could align with the airliner's flight path. The second F-22 mirrored the action, forcing the drone to divert, but the rogue signal adapted instantly, altering its trajectory midair. Alina's pulse accelerated. "This is no ordinary threat," she murmured, eyes scanning the patterns. "They're not just testing me. They're trying to force me into action, to manipulate decisions, responses, and timing. Every microsecond counts. One misstep and they have us." Rhodes' hands tightened on the controls. "Alina, what do we do? These drones, the rogue pilot, I don't even know how to respond." "You watch," Alina said, jaw set, voice calm despite the adrenaline surging through her veins. "I've dealt with this before, but this time civilians are involved. That changes everything." Her fingers danced across the encrypted console, sending rapid, precise countersignals into the frequencies the drones were using. A few of the tiny blips on the radar adjusted, breaking formation as her code disrupted the rogue programming. One by one, some drones fell out of alignment, spiraling harmlessly into the distance. She exhaled slightly, relief mingling with dread. "They adapt fast," she muttered, eyes flicking between the sky and the display. They're watching for every response. Every signal I send is being mirrored, recalculated. Whoever programmed this knows my style, my thought patterns, my past methods. They're using it against me. Hawk's jet dipped again, signaling, communicating urgency, but Alina barely had time to respond. Another tremor shook the plane as a drone aligned perfectly with Flight 227's path, engines flaring dangerously close to the wingtip. Alina's heart raced. "Captain, brace yourself. We're about to get very close." She keyed into a secondary line, sending microbursts of frequency to confuse the drone swarm. The first drone veered off course, narrowly missing the fuselage. Another adjusted its angle, narrowly avoiding collision, but the rogue signal shifted in real time, almost mocking her efforts. Alina's pulse hammered in her ears. "This isn't foreign," she said quietly, voice tight. "This is ours. Someone with inside knowledge, someone from the same program. They know everything about me, my code, my designs. They're forcing me to confront my past." The captain swallowed, hands trembling. "Alina, I don't even know how to process this. Drones, rogue pilot, inside knowledge, civilians." Alina pressed her forehead briefly against the console, a moment to center herself. Memories flooded back, the missions, the classified operations, the team she had trusted and lost. The patterns in front of her were no longer just threats. They were echoes of her past, resurrected for this single, lethal purpose. "Captain," she said finally, voice calm but resolute, "if we survive this, nobody will believe what just happened, but we have to stay ahead. Every move counts. You stay steady and you trust me. That's the only way we get through this." The second F-22 shifted aggressively again, forcing Hawk to adjust his trajectory. The rogue drones adapted in perfect sync, testing every micro-movement Alina could make. Her mind raced. She had trained for countless scenarios like this, but simulations never included innocent passengers screaming as chaos unfolded outside their windows. The cabin trembled again. Passengers panicked, hands gripping seats, eyes wide with confusion and fear. The low hum of the engines was drowned out by the roaring of the Raptors, the shifting drones, and the adrenaline thundering through Alina's veins. She clenched the metal tag in her hoodie pocket, Spectre. She whispered it to herself. "If anyone can fix this, it's me." She keyed in another sequence, sending targeted bursts to confuse the drone's programming. One by one, the blips on the radar began to drop, small victories in the overwhelming chaos. But then, the second F-22 executed a precise maneuver directly threatening Hawk's path, a silent signal that the rogue operator wasn't finished. Alina's pulse hammered. "Captain, hold us steady. We're about to get into the real test." Hawk dipped his wings again, signaling, waiting. Alina's stomach dropped as the realization hit her. The rogue pilot wasn't just testing her, or Hawk, or even the drones. They were forcing her to confront choices with immediate, lethal consequences. One misstep, one miscalculation, one hesitation, and lives would be lost. Her fingers flew across the comm panel again, sending microbursts of frequency, watching the radar like a hawk herself. The rogue signal shifted instantly, adapting to her every move. She exhaled, mind racing at lightning speed. "They know me. They've studied me. They know how I think." Suddenly, a sharp, jarring tremor rattled the plane. A drone aligned perfectly with the wingtip, engines flaring dangerously. Alina slammed a sequence into the console, forcing it off course by inches. The cabin shook violently, screams echoing from behind her. She pressed her forehead against the panel, heart racing, eyes flicking to Hawk above. He dipped sharply, signaling acknowledgement. But the second jet mirrored every move, aggression still intact. Alina swallowed hard. Whoever was controlling that signal had intimate knowledge, enough to push her, test her, and manipulate her instincts. And she knew, deep in her core, that this was just the beginning. The infiltration wasn't over. The rogue pilot was still out there. And Flight 227 was now a battlefield she couldn't ignore. The sky around Flight 227 twisted into chaos. Hawk's jet cut sharply to the left, its afterburners flaring as it intercepted a drone that veered dangerously toward the airliner's tail. The second F-22 shadowed Hawk with predatory precision, every motion calculated, every maneuver deliberately invasive. It wasn't just aggressive flying anymore. It was a direct message. Elena Marlowe's pulse hammered as she watched the shifting formations on the radar. The rogue pilot wasn't hiding their intentions. They were escalating, tightening the noose, pushing her toward a corner she could feel closing in with every second. And the drones, God, the drones weren't backing off either. 3 of them drifted into a coordinated pattern, forming a triangular wedge aimed directly at the plane's right wing. The captain saw it too. Elena, what are they doing? She leaned over the controls so fast the captain flinched. They're testing the structural limits of the aircraft. If they force us to adjust altitude or roll at the wrong moment, the turbulence alone could tear a wing off. The color drained from Rhodes' face. My God. Elena's voice remained steady, though the urgency beneath it throbbed like a heartbeat. This isn't about killing us, not yet. It's about forcing me into contact. They want me to break silence. They want me to respond in a way only Spectre would. She toggled an encrypted panel, fingers moving with muscle memory she hadn't used since the day she vanished from the program. Codes she swore she'd never touch again unfolded across the display. The signal returned, immediate, precise. 3 short bursts. Pause. 2 long bursts. Elena's stomach twisted. She knew that pattern. Is that some kind of message? Rhodes asked. She nodded once, throat tight. It's a challenge code, used only for internal operations, classified level beyond what even top brass normally sees. Rhodes swallowed, meaning the pilot in that jet was one of yours. Elena's silence was all the answer he needed. Outside, Hawk dipped his wings again, a signal she recognized instantly. Status, direction, orders. His jet slid between Flight 227 and the rogue F-22, wings flaring as a warning. The second jet rolled playfully in answer. Then it fired a flare. Not a weapon, but a mark, a territorial display, a threat disguised as a test. Passengers screamed as the bright bloom streaked past their windows, the light flooding the cabin in a surreal orange flash. Oxygen masks bounced wildly. Children cried. Voices rose in terrified chorus. Rhodes fought to steady the plane as turbulence shook the cabin. Why would they do that? He shouted, gripping the controls. Because they know Hawk won't engage unless the threat becomes explicit, Elena said. They're flirting with the line, pushing him, pushing me, pushing the situation. She pressed her palms into the console, forcing herself to breathe. Every instinct screamed at her to respond. Every part of her training told her to broadcast a countersignal. But the moment she did, she was Spectre again. And there was no going back. She toggled a secondary frequency. Hawk's voice cracked through in encrypted bursts. Confirm identity. We need your verification. Who is that pilot? Elena's breath hitched. She wanted to respond. She wanted to tell him everything. But she couldn't, not with the rogue pilot listening, not with civilians at risk. Then another flash outside. A drone slammed into Hawk's tail. Not enough to destroy him, but enough to send his jet spiraling into a barrel roll he hadn't planned. Hawk, Elena shouted before she could stop herself. Rhodes jolted, she froze. The rogue jet reacted instantly. It rolled twice, then banked sharply, then leveled off with a chilling precision that made Elena's skin crawl. They heard me, she whispered, and they wanted me to slip. That's why they hit Hawk. They needed to force a reaction. Rhodes stared at her. Why? What does your voice matter? Elena looked down at the metal tag still tucked beneath her hoodie, the one that no one was supposed to see again. It's voiceprint encoded, she said quietly. My vocal signature was tied to every classified mission I ever led. Anyone listening on the encrypted channels, anyone with access to the program's remains, can confirm exactly who I am. Rhodes blinked, and now they know. Elena nodded. Her name was Elena in those files. It was Spectre. Outside, Hawk regained control, engines flaring as he climbed back into position. He wasn't defeated, not by a long shot, but Elena could sense the growing urgency in each movement of his Raptor. Then the rogue pilot made their boldest move yet. They descended. Hard. Straight toward the commercial plane. A controlled dive, precise, lethal, deliberate. Passengers screamed, the captain cursed, Elena's heart lurched violently. The rogue jet streaked downward, its nose aligning perfectly with the cockpit window of Flight 227, so close she could see the reflection of the jet's helmet visor. Rhodes grabbed the controls, panicked. They're going to hit us. No, Elena whispered, they're going to talk. Her voice trembled, not with fear but with dread. Through the roar of the engines, through the scream of wind and metal, through the static-laced interference. A voice came through the encrypted channel. Cold. Calm. Familiar. Spectre, it said. I knew you weren't dead. Elena froze. Her blood went cold. Her breath vanished. Every muscle locked in place as she stared at the rogue jet hovering too close for comfort. Rhodes turned to her slowly. Elena, who is that? Her lips parted. A whisper, a name she hoped she would never hear again. Raven. The signal crackled again. You're coming with me, the voice said, one way or another. Elena's pulse thundered in her ears. Hawk's jet flared in warning above them. The drones tightened their formation. The rogue jet hovered like a vulture waiting for its prey. The sky held its breath. And Flight 227 hung suspended between life and death. Elena's eyes locked on the rogue F-22, her chest tightening as the pilot's helmeted reflection caught the sunlight. Raven. Her name alone made the air inside the cockpit feel thick and dangerous. She hadn't seen or heard from him in over 2 years, not since the mission that destroyed her past life. Yet here he was, orchestrating chaos in the skies above a commercial airliner, daring her to respond. The hum of Flight 227's engines mixed with the thunderous roar of the Raptors. Drones weaved around the jets like deadly insects, their micromissiles locked in synchronized movement. Elena's fingers hovered over the comm panel, ready to send countersignals, but her mind raced through every contingency. Every choice had consequences, and civilians were now trapped at the center of her personal war. Raven's voice came again, calm, almost taunting, through the encrypted channel. Spectre, you can fight all you want, but it won't matter. I know every protocol you ever used. I can predict your moves before you make them, and I'm not alone. There are others waiting, watching. They're ready to finish what you started. Elena's hands clenched the panel. Raven, this isn't a game. Innocent lives are at stake. Step away, let them go. He laughed softly, a sound that made her stomach twist. Innocence? Oh, Spectre, you still underestimate the situation. You were always too soft, too sentimental. That's why I survived. That's why I found you. And that's why Flight 227 is the perfect lure. You'll come out of hiding or watch them all die. Her pulse hammered in her ears. She thought of Hawk, circling protectively above, silent but steadfast. She thought of the civilians below, screaming, unaware of the deadly ballet above their heads. She thought of every mission she had ever flown, every code she had ever written, every life she had saved or lost. I will not fail them, she told herself. Not now. The rogue jet dipped sharply, forcing Hawk into a defensive role. The drones followed Raven's lead with terrifying precision, adjusting instantaneously to Elena's attempts to disrupt them. The cockpit trembled as she input sequences faster than thought, sending microbursts of frequency to scramble the drone's sensors. A few went haywire, spinning harmlessly into the clouded sky, but the majority remained under Raven's control, relentless and unyielding. Captain Rhodes gripped the controls, knuckles white. "Alina, what do we do? He's insane." "He's tactical," Alina said sharply, eyes never leaving the sky. "And he knows me. That's what makes this dangerous. He's using everything I ever taught him against me. Every instinct, every algorithm, every contingency, he studied them all. I can't fight him like a normal threat." Raven's voice sliced through the encrypted channel again, calm and deadly. "Spectre, you can scramble your toys all you want, but they'll only slow me down. Step into the open, prove you're still alive, or watch them die." Alina exhaled slowly, forcing herself to focus. She pressed a hand to the metal tag beneath her hoodie, the call sign that had defined her, that had been buried and erased. Spectre, a name that carried power, danger, and memory. She whispered it under her breath, a promise to herself, to Hawk, to everyone on Flight 227, "I will protect them, no matter what." Then she made her choice. She keyed into the secure channel, sending a single pulse, a signal only Raven could interpret. It was a lure, a calculated move, a single, perfect opening designed to draw him in without giving away her position. Hawk recognized it immediately, flaring his wings in acknowledgement. The second F-22 responded, dipping sharply toward Flight 227 as if to intercept. And then Raven reacted. He veered toward her signal, precise, confident, a predator moving to strike. Drones shifted to cover his approach, creating a wall of death around him. Alina's heart raced. She wasn't sure if this move would work or if it would play into Raven's hands, but it was the only chance she had to force him into a decisive engagement. "Captain," she said, voice steady despite the adrenaline, "hold your line. Do exactly what I tell you. One wrong move and it's over." Rhodes nodded, terrified but obedient. The plane shuddered as the wind buffeted it from the aggressive maneuvers of the jets above. Passengers clutched seats, some screaming, some frozen in disbelief, completely unaware of the battle being waged over their heads. Alina focused, sending a series of rapid commands through the encrypted panel. Microbursts, counter-frequency signals, precise adjustments, all designed to create a corridor, a trap in the sky. Hawk responded instantly, mirroring her instructions perfectly. Raven, confident as always, dove straight into the trap, unaware of the countermeasures she had layered into the drones, programming, and Hawk's maneuvers. The rogue pilot realized too late. Drones swerved, jets misaligned. Hawk, Raptor executed a controlled spin, using the rogue's momentum against him. Alina's pulse pounded as she watched the aerial chessboard unfold above her. Raven's voice came again, strained this time, a hint of frustration slipping through the calm veneer. "Clever, Spectre, I underestimated you, but you're still in my game. There's nowhere to hide, nowhere to run." Alina's jaw tightened. "You misjudged me, Raven. I am Spectre, and I will protect them even if it kills me." The rogue F-22 wrenched sharply, drones spinning out of alignment, and Hawk executed another perfect maneuver, forcing Raven to retreat momentarily. Alina exhaled sharply, relief mixed with tension. The airspace was far from safe, but she had won the first decisive move. Her gaze returned to Flight 227. The cabin trembled slightly, passengers still panicked but safe for now. She pressed her fingers to the metal tag beneath her hoodie once more. Spectre was alive. Raven had been reminded, and she had shown that she was not just a memory. But she knew the fight wasn't over, not by a long shot. Raven had underestimated her, yes, but he had not been defeated. He would regroup, he would strike again. And next time, the stakes could be even higher. Outside, the sky shimmered in the fading sunlight. Hawk dipped his wings in silent acknowledgement. The rogue F-22, Raven, hovered on the edge of visibility, waiting, patient, dangerous. Alina exhaled slowly. Her pulse still hammered, but determination settled over her like armor. The quiet girl in seat 14A was gone. The operative, the warrior, the ghost known as Spectre remained. And Raven had just learned Spectre would fight back. The sky above Flight 227 shimmered with tension. Elena Marlowe's pulse pounded in her ears, adrenaline coiling tight in her chest. Hawk hovered protectively, wings flaring, while Raven's rogue F-22 lingered on the edge of aggression, a predator that refused to strike prematurely. The drones swirled in a deadly, mechanical dance, their small frames capable of devastating force. Elena's fingers flew across the cockpit controls, toggling counter signals, recalibrating frequencies, sending microbursts that disoriented the drones. The second F-22 mirrored every move, executing her precise commands with flawless timing. Her voice remained calm as she spoke into the encrypted comms. "Hawk, initiate the diversion sequence. Draw Raven away from the airliner. Full throttle, maximum evasion. I'll handle the rest." Hawk dipped sharply, banking left in a fluid arc, taking the rogue pilot along a path designed to separate him from the drone's nearest Flight 227. The airliner shuddered slightly as Elena adjusted its course, balancing turbulence with precision. Passengers screamed, some gripping seats, others pressing faces to the windows. No one realized how close they had come to disaster. Her eyes flicked to the radar. Raven was responding, adjusting with predictable precision, yet the rogue pilot's arrogance was his weakness. Elena had anticipated it. She keyed in a new sequence, one she had designed years ago but never deployed in a real mission. A signal, layered with micro-encryption, aimed directly at the rogue drones and their controlling pilot. Raven realized the pattern almost immediately. "Spectre, what?" But his voice was cut off. The drones faltered, some spinning harmlessly away, others locking momentarily before realigning. Elena's heart hammered. This was her final move, a digital trap encoded with her own signature, capable of overwhelming the rogue operator's control and giving her the upper hand. The rogue F-22 banked sharply, realizing the danger, but it was too late. Hawk executed a flawless maneuver, drawing him further from the airliner, while Elena's counter-signals rippled through the remaining drones. Sparks of disrupted electronics appeared on radar. The swarm began to collapse, one by one, until only a few hovered, disoriented and ineffective. "Elena," Rhodes' whispered voice trembling, "you did it, you stopped them." She didn't respond immediately. Her eyes stayed on the sky, on the rogue F-22 now isolated and vulnerable. Raven's jet dipped in a final attempt to intimidate, but Elena's pulse was steady. She keyed the final microburst, targeting the rogue's guidance systems. Hawk flared his wings as the F-22 tilted sharply, engines screaming as Raven was forced to break off, retreating with precision but defeat etched into every maneuver. Elena exhaled, letting herself relax slightly for the first time in hours. Flight 227 stabilized, wings steady, passengers oblivious to the life-or-death ballet that had played out above them. The roar of engines faded into the distance as Hawk and Raven disengaged. Elena's hands trembled slightly on the controls, not from fear, but from the sheer intensity of what she had just accomplished. Captain Rhodes turned toward her, eyes wide, pale from adrenaline. "Spectre, how did you?" Elena smiled faintly, brushing a hand across the metal tag hidden beneath her hoodie. "Years of training, years of preparation, and I knew him. I knew Raven would predict exactly what I would do, so I turned his expectations against him." The captain shook his head in disbelief. You're incredible, I don't even." Elena held up a hand, cutting him off. "Don't underestimate him. He's still out there somewhere. But for now, the airliner is safe. That's all that matters." Outside, Hawk's jet dipped once more in acknowledgement, then broke formation to return to base. The rogue F-22 disappeared into the horizon, its shadow fading but leaving a lingering threat. Elena pressed her forehead briefly against the panel, heart still pounding. Spectre had survived. Spectre had protected the innocents. And Spectre had proven that the call sign still carried weight, even in a world that had tried to erase it. Rhodes exhaled slowly, finally releasing tension. They'll never believe what happened up here. Not the FAA, not the military. Alina smiled faintly. They don't need to. What matters is that everyone made it through alive. That's the only record that counts. She took a deep breath, letting the adrenaline ebb. Her eyes swept across the cabin where passengers were still shaken but safe. Children clung to parents, hands shaking. Flight attendants whispered reassurances, their faces pale. For a moment, she allowed herself to feel the weight of what had just happened. The sun was beginning to set, casting golden streaks across the clouds. Outside the window, the horizon seemed peaceful, serene, a sharp contrast to the deadly dance that had occurred just moments ago. Alina pressed her hand once more against the metal tag, her voice barely above a whisper. "Spectre isn't gone. Not today. Not ever." Captain Rhodes looked at her with newfound respect, understanding that the quiet girl in seat 14A was gone forever. In her place stood a warrior, a ghost operative, a protector whose name carried weight and danger. The flight continued toward Denver, each mile bringing them closer to safety. Yet Alina's mind remained alert. She knew Raven had not given up, that the infiltration threat still existed, and that she would need to remain vigilant. The sky was her battlefield, and Spectre was ready. As the plane descended, she glanced one last time at the fading horizon. Hawk's jet was still circling high above, a silent guardian in the sky. Alina allowed herself a small, tired smile. Somewhere out there, Raven would be plotting his next move. But she had learned something vital today. She could never run from her past, but she could control her present. And she would fight, fiercely and relentlessly, to protect the lives of those who had no idea what had just transpired above their heads. The cabin quieted as Flight 227 prepared to land. Passengers clutched each other, some still trembling, others whispering prayers of relief. Alina exhaled fully, shoulders dropping, though tension lingered beneath the surface. She wasn't just Alina Marlowe anymore. She was Spectre, alive, formidable, and ready. And the call sign had survived. It had survived for a reason. For her. For them. For the sky. And for the next time danger came from above, Spectre would be waiting. The plane touched down smoothly. Engines roared, wheels screeching against the tarmac. Captain Rhodes exhaled, leaning back with relief. Alina remained upright, eyes scanning the horizon, ready for whatever threat might appear next. The quiet girl in seat 14A had vanished. Spectre remained, alive, vigilant, and unstoppable.